You can't hear a picture.
Yeah, you can.
No, you...
When I first came to South Africa, I didn't know about the African alarm clock. Wrong of me. Heck man, even Pharrell didn't know. But this scruffy-looking bird is kind of
special.
Today we're going to talk about the superpowers of the hadeda, the most hated bird in South Africa. Grab your coffee, sit your ass down, and let's start a conversation.
Yo, Mr. Hadeda, drop it.
Bostricia Agadash. I'm butchering so many words on this channel, huh? So Bostricia agadash, commonly known as the hadeda, is an ibis and a very common bird under the Sahara. It used to be confined to the northeast of South Africa, but in the last century it experienced a great range expansion. Now you can find the hadidas in any gardens, farmlands, golf courses from Johannesburg to Cape Town. Before they were heavily persecuted, and they can still be quite intense. In the bird world, ibises and shorebirds have a superpower. They have a sixth sense. They can feel you without touching you. It's called remote touching. Carla Dutoit and collaborators investigated if the hadeda was also a superbird or just a nuisance. So when we are talking about remote touch, what do we mean? Some birds possess a long, thin, downward curving beak that they thrust into the ground to catch small invertebrates and worms. This behavior is called probing, but doing so they can't rely on their eyes to detect the buried prey, and they have to rely on other senses such as hearing or olfaction. But ibises and shorebirds have a very special sensory organ called the bill-tip organ, descriptive enough. It evolved during the time of the dinosaurs. This organ allows them to detect their prey in the ground and in the water. Mystical. Now, based on the anatomy of the beak, it was assumed that the hadeda was also able to remote touch, but it has never been tested. But just how do you test for a sixth sense? Carla and her collaborators used a series of sensory assays. It's a type of experiment that tests how quickly an animal detects different sensory cues, such as sound or smell. So for these experiments, the hadidas were housed in a free-flight aviaries at a bird sanctuary, and were presented with several trays filled with soil and tasty worms. Now the scientists had to make sure that the birds were not using either their vision, their hearing, or their sense of smell to find the worms. So they play a little white noise as a background music next to the trays, and they mixed crushed worms in the soil so that it was smelling overwhelmingly wormy. To test if the hadidas were able to remote touch, they were given either live worms that wriggle around and produces vibration, and dead worms that did not produce vibrations. This series of experiments allowed the scientists to determine that hadidas were not using hearing or smell to locate the worms, but that they were able to find moving worms much faster than the dead one, which indicates that hadidas can detect a prey underground solely through vibrations. So now we know that the hadidas forage using remote touch. But how does the local environment affect their efficiency? Let me explain. Vibrations are mechanical waves, and they are better transmitted in water than in the air. When hadidas are probing into the wet ground, it can locate worms much faster than on dry ground. And this is not only due to the fact that it's easier to dig in wet grounds. When they forage on dry grounds, the hadidas lose their ability to remote touch, so they have to rely on random probing to find their prey, and it's less efficient. If in the wild The Adidas cannot use the remote touching ability. That means they work twice as much to get the same amount of prey, or they finish the day with only half the amount of prey they expected. So show your support to the Adidas. Send good vibes. Put a bird emoji in the comment section below. So we learned that Adidas were better at foraging in wet grounds. But how do you explain their range expansion then? The present research suggests that one of the driving factors behind the historical expansion of the Adidas is the need for a wet enough ground. The range expansion actually matches with the increase in artificial irrigations around farmhouse and large suburban areas. But with global climate change, we can expect severe heat waves and drought. They will become more frequent and last longer, especially under the Sahara. The Adidas is dependent on moist grounds, and this could threaten their populations in periods of prolonged drought. But rejoice! Hope is not lost. The Hadeda tend to forage in much drier grounds than the other bird that can use remote touching. And that might be because he has a more sensitive vibration detector, remember? The built-in organ than the other birds. So the Hadeda is like a super bird amongst the super birds. In conclusion, Adidas are raucous birds in nature, and many South Africans would prefer to see them dead than alive and boasting. But this early bird has many secrets. Today we saw that environmental conditions of the area where animals forage is important and needs to be taken into account when you investigate foraging behavior. Now, in the case of the Adidas and all the birds able to use remote touch, the water content of the foraging substrate is important. Now, let's not oversleep this alarm call, and let's appreciate what even the less fabulous animals have to offer in terms of natural wonders. And that's a wrap for me today. Leave a like, subscribe if you enjoyed this episode, and see you at the next. Bye!